You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
Today, we've got on the line Ryan Kekeris. He is the Communications Director for the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. Ryan, thanks for talking to us this morning.
Yeah, hey guys, happy to be here.
Fantastic. We're glad to have you. So first off, you're the Communications Director. Really quick, are you the one that runs IUPAT's Twitter account?
Yes.
You are great. If you're not following the Painters Union on Twitter, you need to be doing that. It's a really great follow. It is fire, as the kids say. You can find them at Go IUPAT, at Go IUPAT. Ryan, before we go into the PRO Act, could you tell us a little bit about what brought you to the labor movement? Like, why have you kind of decided that this is what I want to spend my time doing?
So, I come from a family of construction workers. My grandfather was I think a 50-something-year member of the operating engineers in Washington, D.C. Wow. I grew up fairly poor. I've been working since I was 16. I think we all know the value of how hard we work and what it's like not to have a labor union. So it kind of made me dedicated to making that better. And, I grew up in the South as well. I grew up in Southern Virginia on a tobacco farm, and my mother's family were all from North Carolina. So I know what it's like to live in a very depressingly anti-worker state. And I know the value of the union difference, I guess, to be cliche. So it kind of made me dedicated. I worked at Walmart, McDonald's, and all the kind of famously anti-union companies. So, I know what it's like, and I think every person deserves a union. And I really wanted to spend my time and my effort making sure that's a reality.
Right. Yeah, well, Ryan, you and I know what it's like working in a non-union shop. David has no idea. He's never worked in a non-union shop, actually. He's been fortunate enough to have a union job his whole life, fourth-generation Alabama unionist. So he was really fortunate in that. But, of course, he's thankful to have it, and that's why he's here. But yeah,
that's what we're all shooting for,
Right. I mean, yeah, I worked at a restaurant, and the owner worked in a restaurant in Huntsville. The owner lived in Chattanooga. He would come down a couple times a year and check on us, and our labor was able to get him 2 houses and a jet ski. So.
Yeah, I bet he appreciated that too.
Yeah,
right?
I'm sure he did.
Just didn't appreciate it enough to give you good pay and benefits.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So we're here to talk about the PRO Act. So Ryan, tell us what is the PRO Act?
So I guess to put it in context, right? It's been over 100 years since we've had any sort of positive federal labor law reform in this country. Ever since 1935, with the passage of the NLRA, it's more or less been downhill for the average working person. After Taft-Hartley, we've had tons of Supreme Court decisions. It's been just kind of a death by 1,000 cuts for the average working person in this country. And really, to me, the way I like to think about it is the PRO Act is restoring a lot of the rights that the average working person had in the past that were taken away from us. Many of our grandparents and great-grandparents had, I think people don't even realize the difference here, the amount of rights that they had on the job that we don't have now. And so the PRO Act would restore a lot of those rights. Things like, being able to strike, being able to more or less exercise your free speech at work, and to choose where you want to work and how you want to work and under what conditions you want to work. The PRO Act would restore those things.
And one of the things that really, Jacob and I both do a lot of organizing in the community and organizing around unions. And one of the things that really, when I started reading the PRO Act in depth was the card check ability, and for union organizers and really for workers that want to form a union, that streamlines and takes a lot of that redundancy out of organizing and getting a union in place. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I know some people might be familiar with in 2008, when Obama was elected, there was a bill that was proposed called the Employee Free Choice Act. Obama campaigned on that bill. They swore up and down they would pass that bill.
Yeah.
Well, we found out pretty quickly into his first administration that they had no intention of fighting for that bill.
Yeah.
It kind of went out with a whimper a little bit. And I think part of what we wanted to do with this campaign was to, around the PRO Act, was to kind of learn from those mistakes. And, one of the reasons we started this campaign so early, which was, I think, a couple months ago now, was we wanted to get on the capacity, and we wanted to build the kind of grassroots and decentralized, nationwide movement to make sure that Biden will live up to his pledge to pass this bill. And so, the big provision out of the Employee Free Choice Act was card check, which more or less means that once a simple majority of workers on a job site signs basically a card or a form saying they want to form a union, then the union's formed. You don't have to go through the protracted process that workers have to go through right now, which basically can be delayed, can be fought in court, can be interfered with by the employer, and more or less is overwhelmingly. The PRO Act would prevent those employers from drawing that process out. It would prohibit them from interfering in union elections. It would, basically restore us to where we were in 1936, allowing workers to freely exercise their right to form a union.
Yeah, and restore some democracy in the workplace, because what we're seeing right now with, for example, with RDWSU down in Bessemer with Amazon, they've already agreed on the bargaining unit, and and it's like, and now we talked about yesterday, or we've been following it extremely closely and put out a tweet yesterday that once again. I think January 21st, Amazon's lawyers came back in there trying to delay the election again to give them more time to hold captive audience meetings and try to find some people to terminate. So, it does away with a lot of this, this company thugism. We get termed union thugs constantly, but in a union election, the company is generally the thug.
Right, absolutely. And a lot of folks, they really don't understand just how much we really, most people are revulsed by politicians trying to take a person's right to vote away. They would be revulsed by physical intimidation or economic pressure being put on a person. If a boss told a worker, if you vote for Joe Biden, I'm going to fire you, right? Everybody, would recognize that is terrible, but they don't know that happens all the time. If not those words, the message is communicated all the time in union elections, and it's drawn out, and there are these huge campaigns built around union busting, and the Trumps in LRB recently allowed for what amounts to card check for decertification. But we can't have card check to bring a union in, but we can have card check to get a union out. So that shows that, the bosses who controlled the Trump administration, they know that card check is an easier campaign to win for either side if you're doing that kind of campaign. So the bosses want to be able to have card check for a decertification campaign, but not to bring a union in.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that what you're seeing and what you both just laid out is that it has been basically official U.S. government policy for, 70 years now, that the employer's right to bust a union is more important than your right as working people to form a union. And we've seen that in a million different, laws and regulations and executive actions and Supreme Court decisions. And looking at Amazon as an example, almost everything you laid out would be illegal if the PRO Act were the law of the land today.
Exactly.
They do their usual tricks where they want to expand the bargaining unit to include as many people as possible, but only the people that they think are likely to vote against the union,
right?
Or to exclude people that would want to vote for the union. That would be illegal. Captive audience meetings would be illegal. The hilariously bad anti-union consulting firm that I'm sure they're paying just millions and millions of dollars to.
Yep.
would be heavily regulated under the PRO Act. They would have to more or less post a notice saying, hey, we're hiring people and we're spending this amount of money to persuade you not to join a union.
Right.
So all those things would be different under the PRO Act. And, it's not a perfect bill, but I think that it would make a world of difference to the average person and would really, balance out the playing field to say that your rights as a working person are every bit as important as Jeff Bezos' right to make, $1 million a second or however much he makes.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, that's really important to hit home that, the people that are pushing for the PRO Act, the unions that are pushing for the PRO Act, they're just trying to bring more democracy, give you more of a voice on the job. And the people who are fighting against it, like Jeff Bezos, they hate you, right? I mean, that's just about all there is to it. We're going to have some more with Ryan Kekeris, communications director with the Painters Union, on the other side of the break about the PRO Act. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
Try to add it up. You count the principal, J-Rig, add it up. You count the first, try to add it up. You count the principal, J-Rig, add it up. You count the five.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host David Story. That was Lee Baines and the Glory Fires playing us in. I'm rocking one of their shirts right now. You can see you can't see, but in little writing it says, "Done playing dead," and I think that's a good theme for today's episode, talking about the PRO Act and how the labor movement is really, we are really focused on getting this passed. And Hamilton Nolan, he's a writer and labor reporter for In These Times. He had a really good piece about how unions spend so much money on getting Democrats elected because they don't openly try to kill us as much as the Republicans do. And how, if we can't pass the PRO Act, we've really got to assess, was it worth spending hundreds of millions of dollars, not in dues money. I want to make that clear for the audience, because people are told a lot of times that union dues are spent on political campaigns, and that is a lie. That's not true. But union members do voluntarily contribute to PACs, political action committees, that the union runs, and that we do spend on political campaigns. And so,
you've seen the turnout in Georgia for the Senate. We think that's so important. Mm-hmm. And what Ryan was saying earlier about the reason they started earlier, honestly, I don't think they started too early.
Right.
I think all of the other unions, my union including, if you're out there listening, is late to the damn ball game.
Absolutely.
Get your ass in the game and quit playing on the sidelines.
Absolutely.
That's the point that I want to make, and that's the reason we had Ryan on, and the reason, early on we seen IUPAT with this strong push for the PRO Act, and both of us was like, it's about time.
Yeah, I mean, we're serious. If we can't get them to pass the PRO Act, we need to consider a total and complete halt on unions spending money on Democrats until we can figure out what the hell is going on. Okay?
We need to do something.
Yeah, we need to do something. So, we were talking on the other side about what the PRO Act is doing, or what it does, and one of the things that you mentioned, but we didn't really dig into it, was the fact that it's going to prohibit a lot of this union-busting kind of retaliatory activity that employers engage in. And the interesting thing is that this is already illegal. You can't fire a worker for being pro-union legally. It is illegal to do that. And companies they routinely lose cases at the NLRB, and they routinely have to offer fired union organizers their job back, and they routinely have to pay back wages, but that's about it. And so for a company like Amazon, like Walmart, who have billions of dollars to spend on these efforts, paying back wages for a few months is totally worth it if you can keep, for 2 or 3 employees, if you can keep a union out. And so what this act does, what the PRO Act does, is it increases the penalties for that. Not only are you going to have to pay back wages if you fire a pro-union worker for being pro-union, you're going to have to pay penalties on top of that. And the managers and the supervisors and the executives who direct that are going to be fined, and they could face criminal. Or I'm not sure if it's criminal, but they could face some kind of punishment. Ryan, I don't know. I may have stole your thunder there, but
No. I mean, you're spot on, and I think something important to point out too is that right now, if you are fired for trying to organize at your job, and let's say, they could the employer could drag this out for basically forever, right? But you're fired, you have to go out and get another job, right? Because you can't survive on nothing. So if you go out and get a job, if and when that employer who fired you is found liable and they have to pay back wages, they only have to pay the difference between what you are making at your new job and what you made at your old job. So really, they can end up paying you basically nothing back.
Wow.
Depending on how much you are making between those two jobs. So it's broken, and they know it's broken. It's broken intentionally. Maybe even broken is the wrong word. It's working as intended, but the method that it's intended basically to shield the employer. And there's other stuff too. There was a Supreme Court decision that basically says if you're an immigrant worker and you're undocumented, they don't have to pay you back wages at all. So they can just basically fire you, and then you have no recourse at all. And these companies know that, and that's why that's why they know that undocumented workers can't really organize, even though in theory they have the same rights as us. They know that if you try to organize and they fire you, it's a slap on the wrist. It could come a decade later. It will always be cheaper for them to stamp out any sort of democracy at work than it would be for them to actually let you organize.
Yeah, I was talking to Jacob just this past week about a group that I organized about 2 years ago. Had the entire bargaining unit signed A cards except for one, which is almost unheard of anywhere, but especially unheard of in Alabama. I mean, everybody was on board. We come down to, and of course they drug out the election as long as they could, but then we come down to within 1 week of the election, and the company goes from having to make, I think it was 20% contributions on their health care for their employers, to saying, you know what, we've had a change of heart. We'll wipe away that 20% and we'll give you free health care. And that's absolutely illegal. We all know it's illegal. They can't bribe. In any other business, it's illegal to bribe somebody to do something. And yet there's nothing that we can do. Our hands are tied. Yes, we can go and file a ULP, unfair labor practice, with NLRB. But then who's the bad guy in that case? Look at what the union done. They got your health care taken away where you had to pay. So, and then the PRO Act does eliminate a lot of that BS that you see the company games play. And like you said, it is about democracy in the workplace. For anybody that thinks that it's not, they're fooling themselves.
Well, and I think it's important to tell the ending of that story, that the employer went back on that, right?
Yeah, last year, 6 months ago, they started. Of course, there's nothing lasts forever unless you're negotiating it. But they went back on it, and they've contacted me. But it's difficult to put this drive back together because they've increased the bargaining unit quite substantially since then. And it was illegal. Just to be perfectly clear, it was illegal when they done it, and that's what's so frustrating about the company versus the workers is the company is constantly allowed and overlooked to do all of these illegal things, and it just gets swept under the table.
Yeah, and, there's a quote that kind of goes around every now and then that says, if the penalty for something is a fine, then the only people that it's illegal for are the poor. And, I think that's apropos here in these situations, because the penalties are often not even fines, and when they're fines, they're very little fines, and they're not actually directly on the person doing the thing. It's on the company, and it comes out of the budget, and it's like it's worth it to keep a union out, and so they break the law on purpose. I mean, there was a timeline that I saw that was written by union attorneys during a union busting campaign. I think it was Secrets of a Union Buster that it was in this book or something, and there was a timeline of a union election. It said, don't break the law here, break the law here. And I mean, they do it on purpose. And so we're going to be talking some more about the PRO Act and what it does on the other side. Stay tuned.
Put it there, boy, and we'll Show these fascists what a couple of hillbillies can do. Well, I'm gonna tell you fascists, you may be surprised. People in this world are getting organized. You're bound to lose, you fascists, bound to lose.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host David Story. On the line, we have Ryan Kekeris, the communications director for the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. We are talking about the PRO Act. We're just kind of going down the list of some of the big things that the PRO Act does. So, Ryan, one of the things that the PRO Act does is it increases protections for protests and strikes and removes some of the restrictions on strikes and protest activity. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so, when the National Labor Relations Act was passed in 1935, it guaranteed your right to strike for certain things. Among those were things like solidarity strikes, secondary boycotts, basically a range of economic tools that workers could use to basically enforce their demands. Things like the, some of the sit-down strikes, a lot of the very pivotal moments in labor's history were won with these tools. And over time, and then particularly under Taft-Hartley, these were all made illegal. And so the PRO Act would restore your right to engage in some of these tactics. Things like if you've seen recently in New York with the Teamster strike, where a Teamster's truck driver refused to deliver, refused to cross the picket line. The PRO Act would allow unions in different areas of work to do that in support of each other. So, if we're construction workers and when we're striking or we're picketing outside of a project, this would allow clerks or grocery store workers to join us. Things like that, and it would greatly increase. And I think personally, I think that is probably the one of the single biggest things in the PRO Act that a lot of people might not be familiar with because they've been illegal for so long. But this would open up a world of possibilities for the labor movement to work in conjunction and to really break down the barriers to kind of keep us so isolated and so stratified. It would be an enormous difference for the average working person.
And really what it's doing, if you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, what it's doing is restoring the original constitutional right of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly that's been taken away from working class for 100 years.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the fact if you want to look at it from a constitutionalist perspective.
And, the dynamics here are really important for union members. We recognize that organizing and collective action in a workplace is that's where we get our power. That's why union wages are higher. That's why union working conditions are better. It's because in a workplace, we all come together. If we can come together across workplaces, we can do even more. And there's a reason that that's one of the first things after the passage of the NLRA that bosses and corporate politicians tried to make illegal was cooperation across workplaces and across unions, because the larger the more expansive our bounds of solidarity are, the more powerful the working class is. And so they want to do everything they can to atomize us and break up our collective power.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that, as a working person, right, our power comes from our ability to produce and then also to not produce,
right,
and to not work. And, they've more or less taken away from us the ability to say, well, I'm not going to work because these things are happening that I don't like, or you're doing these things to me and I'm going to stop working until you stop. They've taken that away from us. For, almost 100 years now, you've had courts who would come down with just like extreme penalties on workers who do these sorts of things. Right now, if a union orders an illegal strike, that union could be more or less bankrupted by the court system.
Exactly.
And you saw that, or the threat of that, with the longshoremen out west, where they got a judgment because of what was deemed an illegal work stoppage that I believe was valued more than the entire union itself.
Yeah.
So that they are under no pretenses. They will bankrupt a union that orders these sorts of things right now, and the PRO Act would let us do that without that fear.
And there is no situation under current labor law where a company would ever get such a large fine that the company that the fine would be valued at more than the company. I mean, that just doesn't happen, and that shows how lopsided our labor law is in this country, and how much the PRO Act can do to fix that.
I mean, look at, to use a morbid example, look at the opioid manufacturers who are more or less throwing things they know are killing people. And my father was a construction worker who died from an opiate overdose, so I know this very personally.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
They, look at the fine they got. It's pennies on the dollar compared to what a labor union would be fined for literally just telling people to do a secondary boycott or a sit down strike or something. I mean, the laws in this country are just extremely lopsided against working people.
Well, and even if you want to take that farther and bring it into the actual labor movement itself, you can look at the meatpacking industry out in, I can't remember if the Dakotas or something, to where they were gambling on how many workers would get the COVID, and numerous workers died, and they were fined a few $1,000s for forcing these workers to come in. Basically,
it's a joke.
Give their life for the company, and the
so
companies
that we can have food on our table, so that everybody else in the country can have food on their table.
Well, I mean it's the food on the. Nah, there's more than one way to package. Maybe it slows down production a little bit, but there's more than one way to handle getting food on people's table than turning this into a joke and having people come in and work sick and cover up for those people. I mean, it's not like there wasn't
right.
Look at the case. It's sickening to see the amount of money this company was fined for ostensibly murder.
Yeah.
For murder, where anyone else in the country would go to jail, would go to prison. They're slapped on the wrist with a little fine and said, "Oh well, it was just a worker." I'm trying not to cuss.
Yeah. I mean, it is really sickening, and the PRO Act, of course, it's not gonna fix all. It's not gonna totally fix all of the lopsided. There are lopsided laws across the books, but in labor law, it will go a long way into making it more fair. The next thing, let's talk about employee misclassification. Ryan, I'll let you take that away.
Yeah, I mean, so this is commonly, I think, thought of as like, Uber and Lyft and Instacart and a lot of the quote gig economy, right? But worker misclassification from the construction standpoint is one of the most pervasive and destructive issues in the industry right now. If you're looking at a house being built, right? This is kind of like an example, but you'll have a general contractor who will hire a bunch of what they call subcontractors for all the various trades. And then what we're seeing and what's been happening, I think, particularly since the 2008 economic crash, was now, let's say you're a painting subcontractor, you would hire, let's say, 30 painters, and then you'll say each one of those painters is an independent subcontractor. Yeah, right. So they're all 1099 workers. And really the point of that is that it shifts liability down to the individual. Yep. So if something happens, the company can say, well, they're not an employee of ours. They're an independent subcontractor. They're their own little mini business. And what follows that is just a whole host of terrible things like wage theft, just safety violations. And, I think the biggest thing is that independent subcontractors have no labor rights.
Yep.
So it's basically like an easy trick to totally make labor law not apply to millions of workers. And we see that all across the construction industry. And that ties in with a lot of other things like, undocumented workers who are even under more risk, because then not only are they misclassified, that if they speak up or try and organize, they have that added threat of saying, well, we'll just call ICE, or we'll get you deported, or, we'll threaten you in ways that, go beyond that. So we see that all over the place, and particularly in the South. You see a strong correlation between lower union density and higher cases of this worker misclassification. So the PRO Act would basically greatly increase the threshold that would be required to be a quote independent subcontractor, and it would more or less end worker misclassification in the construction industry as well as in the gig economy. So you're all those Uber and Lyft drivers, and we saw kind of a preview of this fight in California with first AB 5, then Proposition 22, and more or less the PRO Act would have taken AB 5 and would have made it a national law to where these companies can't just say, oh, every person who works for me is not actually an employee of mine, even though they clearly are. They're all these little mini micro businesses that we call subcontractors or 1099 workers.
And man, we talked about that a few months ago after that legislation was passed in California, and for all the industrial unionists out there, which I'm a part of, that says, well, that's just affecting this small portion of work group, and now it's spreading into the construction industry and the trades industry. Make no mistake that is the game plan, and it's always the game plan. That the companies don't think about this short term. They get a small foothold in one specific area, and it starts branching out. And that exact same thing can happen, and does happen, in an industrial union as well. With a good example is IT workers, the workers down in Disney World. You know, they're full-time employees. They're told to train their new what do you call it?
Replacements.
Yeah, replacements. Yeah. The independent contractors. And that's the game.
Yeah,
that is the game.
Yeah, and just talking about the creep. I mean, there's a grocery store in California that immediately after Prop 22 passed, they fired all of their delivery drivers, and now they're going to be using exclusively, some kind of rideshare service like
They're
Uber Eats
for
or
your
something.
Job.
I mean, that's exactly it's not going to be confined to Uber and Lyft and these jobs like this. It's going to branch out as far as they can take it. They'll go as far as they can take it. We're going to have Ryan on for one more segment. We're going to talk about what the PRO Act does with right-to-work laws, and then we want to talk about why the PRO Act is something that's important specifically for non-union workers. We want to make sure that it's clear that it doesn't just help union workers. It's going to primarily, in fact, help non-union workers, so stay tuned.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
Folks, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host David Story. On the line, we have Ryan Kekeris, the Communications Director for the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. We are talking about the PRO Act. So the last kind of big thing, unless there's anything you want to talk about as far as the functionality of the law, is what it does to right-to-work laws.
Yeah, so I mean, right now you're looking at, I think, a slight majority of all the states in the country have passed the right-to-work law. The long story short, and the good news is that the PRO Act would eliminate all of them. It would make right to work illegal across the country. And so if you live in a right to work state right now, you wouldn't after the PRO Act passes.
Yeah. And so there you go. I mean, that's the a huge part of the PRO Act. It's a very, very good thing, eliminating right to work across the country. And I don't want to spend too much time on that, just because we're about halfway through the show now. And we had an excellent interview with Daniel Harris, who was the political review opinion editor for the University of Chicago, about right to work and why.
For less. Let's clarify that.
I mean, right. And why those laws we got to kill them across the country. And so if you want to learn more about right to work, why it's bad, you can find that interview on our YouTube channel. And so, Ryan, to kind of round it out, I want to, make a pitch to the non-union listeners in the audience about why should people that don't have a union in their workplace care about the PRO Act?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we all understand that the backlash against this bill, when this really starts taking off, is going to be very heated. The business community, the employer associations, the non-union lobbying firms, and anti-union consultants are going to come out full force against this, as you saw in California with AB 5.
And already right now. I mean, I've seen several op-eds already being written.
Yeah,
this past
exactly. You're already seeing, I think the National Right to Work Foundation has put up a kind of a counter campaign to ours. It's something stupid like the free enterprise zone or something. So you're going to see that, right? And what they're going to say is that the PRO Act is just a handout to, you know, the big union fat cats and, you know, all those stereotypes of, you know, these like guys smoking cigars. But, you know, it couldn't be further from the truth. Really, the biggest benefactor of the PRO Act would be non-union workers, primarily in the U.S. South. So if you're a Southern worker who doesn't have a union, the PRO Act would give you the tools to make one if you wanted one. And if not, the good news is that as union density rises, conditions rise for every worker.
Yep. Right.
So it would benefit you in the South. And if you're a non-union worker, the most primarily, because the people in the union right now, you know, they still have problems, obviously, and they still suffer from a lot of these laws, but they do have a level of security that our non-union sisters and brothers don't. And so really what the PRO Act is aimed at is increasing the rights of non-union workers, restoring the rights that your grandparents had, and putting you in an even playing field to say that your voice at work matters, and it matters just as much, if not more, than the employers.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean that's exactly right. I couldn't have said it better myself. And you know, to kind of illustrate the point about union workers having a bit more security than non-union workers, this is something that just came out last week. The BLS numbers, the Bureau of Labor Statistics came out. They came out with their annual numbers last week, and StrikeWave, you know, some friends of ours did a good breakdown on their website of what those numbers mean. And one of the interesting things is that union membership fell by 321,000, but the union membership rate went up. And the reason for that is because so many more non-union jobs were lost that the proportion of union jobs actually got higher. And that really illustrates that even in this time, you know, when there are a lot of union workers out of work right now. But if you're a union worker, you are less likely to, you know, you've got job security. In almost all of these contracts, you've got significantly better job security than your non-union counterparts. And when you get fired, or you know, when you have to be laid off, when something happens with the company's budget, you're going to have a negotiated severance package that you and your sisters and brothers on the job negotiated with your boss to make it fair to you as you transition into a different job.
Yeah. Yeah, and
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
Rob.
I mean that's kind of a dire example, and you know the fact that we're all hurting really badly, but the ability to form a union, you know, it does give you a little bit of a added layer of security, and really what it does is it says your voice at work matters, and the things that you prioritize, you have a vehicle with which to negotiate on behalf of them. And you know, like I said, I grew up in the South. Almost everyone I know down there, back in Virginia, North Carolina, they don't have a union, and they have no recourse and no say at all. They are totally at the mercy of, you know, acts of God and their employer. And it's very unfortunate. And the PRO Act would, I think, give them that voice back.
Yeah. Yeah, and before we let you go, Ryan, a personal favor from us, because we've got IUPAT local here, I think in Sheffield or Muscle Shoals, somewhere in the Tri-Cities area, which is about 30 miles, 40 miles from us. But I don't know if you've got some brothers down here, because I mean the entire reason we put this show together was to organize the South. But you know, I mean that we both recognize the power that it brings to the working class, and we've got, you know, the iron workers signed on, the machinist union. We got a lot of different unions that work with us, and we try to provide, you know, information to workers, and that's one segment of the industry in the South, probably the least represented, is the construction industry. I mean, we've got the iron workers, we've got IBEW, steam fitters and pipe fitters, but you know, general construction workers are not represented. I would say there's less than
there's a lot of room for growth.
Yeah, no kidding. So we would like to get them engaged, and maybe they are, and we just don't know it. But I know there's a local over there, because I work with a brother at my plant that come from there.
Yep.
They're a vocal or a minority in the area, and we want to push their voice as well, because it's apparent that your international is fire right now. I mean, they know what we're doing. I mean, it's important to point out, and it's important to give credit where credit's due, is your international is leading the fight that we should all be following.
Yeah.
And I don't see anybody else doing it.
Yeah.
And I would like to get those brothers and sisters over there engaged.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to pass the word along. I don't quote me on this, but I do believe our local is in Muscle Shoals. But we have locals all across the South. I mean, now, admittedly, our density is much lower there than I would like it to be, and I think that they would like it to be as well. But we are an international union. We have our district council 77 represents most of the old, the old South, I guess you could say, from North Carolina down to Georgia, and then west as well. But yeah, happy to pass the word along and happy to get them involved.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Yeah.
No,
Ryan,
anytime, I appreciate it.
Have you got any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, my only request to my sisters and brothers in the South, and I would say, on a personal note, organizing the South is kind of like my, that is my primary goal in my career and in my activism. So I'm happy to do the show. My only request would be, if you want to get involved in this fight, go to passtheproact.org. That's passtheproact.org. You can sign up to be an individual supporter, or if you are a union rep, or you work for a nonprofit or an allied group, you can sign up on behalf of your group as well. But we want to get more people involved, and we're going to need all of us to get involved if we want to win this fight.
Yep, absolutely. Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate your time.
Sincerely.
Anytime, guys.
Yep.
All right. So, everybody, that was Ryan Kekeris. He is the communications director for the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. If you want to see what he's tweeting, you can follow IUPAT on Twitter at GoIUPAT. They got a really, really good follow on Twitter there. So thanks for tuning in, folks. We appreciate your time. If you want to see what we are up to throughout the week, get our snide quips about the news of the day, then you should follow us on social media. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Valley Labor Report. We're on Twitter at Labor Reporters. I'm on Twitter at JacobM_AL. David is on Twitter at Radical Unionist. That's spelled RADICL Unionist. And if you missed part of the show and want to go back and watch it later, you can search YouTube for the Valley Labor Report and subscribe to our channel. You can go back and watch the full show there, and we also clip segments throughout the week, so if you see something that looks interesting to you, but you don't want to listen to the whole show, you can just find it there. We also upload the program on more than 11 different podcasting apps, so to see if we are on your listening platform of choice, go to thevalleylaborreport.transistor.fm/subscribe. You can go to our website to find out more about us, thevalleylaborreport.org. And finally, if you appreciate our work and want to help us stay on the air, you can send us a couple dollars a month on patreon.com/thevalleylaborreport. Listener support goes a long way, and we really appreciate those of you who are supporting us currently on Patreon.